The job posting said, steady pay, night differential, full benefits after 90 days. It didn't mention the rules. I'm Caleb Hart, 31 years old, and I took the conductor job with Eastern Division Rail Services because I needed something, anything, that felt like forward motion. After Sarah left, after the medical bills from my father's last year piled up like snowdrifts against my credit score, I'd spent 2 years in a warehouse pushing pallets and watching my future shrink. The railroad seemed like an escape. Quiet. Nights, steel and schedules. The satisfying logic of tonnage and timetables. No chaos. No variables I couldn't predict. My first graveyard shift was a Thursday in late October. The dispatcher briefed me on the route. Scranton to Lowell's Ford, a near-forgotten town tucked against the ridges of old coal country. 47. Miles mostly freight with occasional passenger service for the handful of people who still lived out there. The line threaded through abandoned mining towns, tree-choked cuts and stretches of track so remote you could go miles without seeing a single porch light. I met my engineer at the yard office just after 10 p.m. Everyone called him Mac, full, named Gerald McKenna, though I got the sense no one had used Gerald in decades. He was somewhere north of 50, with a face like weathered granite and hands that moved with the kind of economy that comes from 30 years of doing the same precise motions. He looked me over once, nodded, and handed me a thermos of coffee without a word. We did the pre-trip inspection together. Mac walked the length of the consist, 2 locomotives, 5 freight cars, 2 passenger coaches that had seen better decades, testing brake lines and checking glad hands with the focused silence of a man performing a ritual. I followed, trying to absorb his rhythm, the way he'd pause and listen to things I couldn't hear, the way his eyes tracked along the undercarriage like he was reading a language written in rust and grease. It was only after we climbed into the lead unit and Mac fired up the prime mover that he spoke more than 3 words at once. "You'll want this," he said, pulling a folded sheet of paper from above the sun visor. The paper was off-white, stained with years of coffee rings and fingerprint smudges, creased soft as cloth from repeated handling. He handed it across the cab. I unfolded it. At the top, in faded typewriter script, it read, "Nightline Rules, Eastern Division." Below that, a numbered list. Never look directly into the mile 41 tunnel mouth when the headlight first hits it. If the signal boards between mile 36-42 all show green at once, treat it as a stop. Do not open doors for anyone at Denton Station after 013. It's been closed since 78. If you see someone walking the ballast keeping pace with the train, do not acknowledge them. If the dispatcher's voice comes over the radio without a call sign, do not respond. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Mac, waiting for the punchline. He was already settling into his seat, adjusting the reverser, eyes on the control panel. "Not a joke," he said, as if he'd heard the question I hadn't asked. "You'll follow them, or you won't last." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to ask if this was standard hazing for new hires, some kind of initiation game the veterans played to see how gullible you were. But something about the way Mac said it, flat, factual, like he was explaining brake pressure, made the words stick in my throat. "Is this official railroad policy?" I managed. "No." Mac released the independent brake and the locomotive shuddered to life beneath us. "It's survival policy." The radio crackled. Dispatcher gave us clearance, and Mac acknowledged with his call sign. The train rolled forward, wheels finding their rhythm, and the yard lights fell away behind us. I folded the rules sheet and tucked it into my vest pocket. Steel and schedules, I reminded myself. Physics, thermodynamics, friction coefficients. There was no room in the mechanical world for whatever this was. We passed through the outskirts of Scranton, past shuttered factories and rows of worker housing that had been abandoned when the coal dried up. The line curved northeast, following a river valley that deepened as we climbed. The headlight cut a narrow tunnel through the darkness, illuminating 30 feet of rail, ballast, and the tangled wall of trees pressing in from both sides. Mac ran the throttle with barely a glance at the speedometer, his attention somewhere else listening, I thought, though I couldn't say to what. The radio murmured occasional crosstalk from other trains on distant routes. Outside, the world was ink black except where our lights touched it. At mile 12, we passed the ruins of a tipple, its skeleton frame listing against the sky. At mile 18, a burned-out church, steeple collapsed into the nave. At mile 23, a signal mast that hadn't been lit in years stood like a grave marker beside the right-of-way. I tried to settle into the rhythm, checked the air pressure gauges, monitored the consist, logged our position every 10 minutes. But the rules sheet felt heavy in my pocket, a weight that had nothing to do with paper. "Mac," I said somewhere around mile 30, "these rules, where did they come from?" He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed on the windshield, tracking the rails as they curved into shadow. "Trial and error," he said. "Mostly error." "Error," I repeated. "People who didn't follow them." Mac's hand adjusted the throttle, slowing us slightly as we approached a grade. "People who thought they knew better." And what happened to them? For a long moment, the only sound was the diesel's growl and the rhythmic clack of wheels over rail joints. Then Mac said, "Some of them are still out here." The way he said it, still out here, not still around or still working the line, made my skin prickle. I wanted to press him, to demand a straight answer, something I could categorize and dismiss. But the radio crackled again, and Mac was acknowledging the mile 36 approach signal, and I realized we were entering what the rules called the stretch. Miles 36 through 42, the section where most of the rules applied. The trees thickened, the cuts deepened. The headlight seemed to penetrate less of the darkness, as if the night here had more density, more substance. I glanced at the rule sheet again. Never look directly into the mile 41 tunnel mouth when the headlight first hits it. "What's at mile 41?" I asked. Mac's jaw tightened. "A tunnel. Goes about a quarter mile through the ridge, built in 1902, reinforced in 54. Straight bore, slight downgrade." He spoke like he was reciting engineering specs, but his hands were tight on the controls. "And something else." "Something else. You'll see." Mac keyed the radio, calling out our position to dispatch. Then he turned to me, and for the first time that night, I saw something in his face that wasn't just fatigue. "When we get close, you keep your eyes on the instrument panel. Not the windshield, not the side window, the instruments, understand?" I didn't understand, but I nodded anyway. The signal mast at mile 38 showed yellow over red. Approach with caution. Mac throttled down and the train's momentum bled away. Outside, the world was a study in black and deeper black, the trees so dense they formed a solid wall. No lights, no signs of habitation, just the rails stretching ahead, silver threads disappearing into nothing. Mile 40. The grade steepened. I could feel the locomotive working harder, the prime mover's pitch rising. Mile 41 approached. Mac's hand moved to the headlight dimmer. "Eyes down, Caleb." Every instinct in me wanted to look, to see what was ahead, to understand what we were moving toward. But something in Mac's voice, not quite fear but its close cousin, made me drop my gaze to the control panel. I stared at the gauges. Air pressure steady, amperage normal. Speedometer reading 19 miles per hour. In my peripheral vision, I saw the darkness ahead change texture. The headlight found something, some surface that reflected differently. The tunnel mouth I knew, though I wasn't looking at it directly. And then I felt it, a pressure against my eyes, like someone pressing thumbs gently against my closed lids. An invitation, a pull. The urge to look up was so strong it felt like a physical force, like gravity had rotated 90 degrees and was trying to pivot my head toward the windshield. Never look directly into the mile 41 tunnel mouth when the headlight first hits it. I gripped the edge of the console, kept my eyes locked on the instruments. The seconds stretched, the pressure increased. In the reflection on the dark glass of the control panel, I saw light shift. The tunnel swallowing us, walls closing in on both sides. Then we were inside. The pressure vanished. The world became the rhythmic thud of wheels over expansion joints and the echo of the diesel's roar bouncing off stone. Mac didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge what had just happened. He just watched. The rails unspool ahead as we passed through the tunnel and emerged on the far side into slightly less oppressive darkness. At mile 42, I finally looked up. The signal showed green. The trees opened up slightly and I could see stars through gaps in the canopy. I pulled out the rules sheet again, hands not quite steady, and read Rule 1 one more time. Okay, I said quietly. So they're not a joke? Mac glanced at me, almost smiled. No, he said. They're not. We rolled on through the night toward Lowell's Ford, and I understood with perfect, terrible clarity that I'd entered a world with different laws. That steel and schedules wouldn't be enough, that the rules weren't about hazing or tradition or keeping new hires nervous. They were about something else, something that lived in the miles between 36 and 42, in a tunnel built more than a century ago, in the darkness that pressed against the glass, something that was patient and hungry and very, very good at waiting. My second night on the line, I told myself I'd keep a scientific mind about it all. The pressure I'd felt approaching mile 41, the urge to look at the tunnel, that could be explained. Psychological suggestion, maybe. Mac's warnings priming me to experience something that wasn't actually there. The human brain is excellent at manufacturing sensations when expectation runs high enough. I'd read about it. Confirmation bias. Pattern recognition gone haywire. I reported to the yard at 22 Sioux, determined to approach the shift with skepticism intact. The rules were in my pocket again, but I told myself they were just guidelines, safety culture wrapped in creepy language to make sure people paid attention. Every workplace had its mythology. Mac was already in the cab when I climbed aboard. Same worn jacket, same thermos of coffee, same economy of motion as he checked the control panel. He nodded when he saw me but didn't speak until we'd cleared the yard limits. Sleep all right? He asked, voice neutral. Fine, I lied. I'd actually spent the previous day researching the line's history, looking for accidents, incidents, anything that might explain the rules. I'd found remarkably little, a few labor disputes in the 60s, some derailments in winter weather, the usual citations for vegetation management. Nothing that screamed supernatural, nothing that justified Rule 4. If you see someone walking the ballast keeping pace with the train, do not acknowledge them. Good, Mac said. He throttled up as we passed mile 10, and the train settled into its rhythm. We've got a clean manifest tonight. No passengers, just freight. Should be quiet. Quiet, that was one word for it. The night was fog-thick, the kind of ground-hugging mist that gathers in valleys and doesn't lift until dawn. It turned the headlight beam into a diffuse glow, softening the world's edges. Visibility was maybe 50 feet. The trees emerged from the fog like apparitions and vanished just as quickly behind us. We made good time through the first 30 miles. The radio murmured dispatch traffic. Mac ran the throttle with the same precise attention I'd seen before, his eyes constantly scanning, not just ahead but to the sides, checking the right-of-way, the drainage, the signal masts appearing and dissolving in the fog. At mile 35, just before we entered the stretch, Mac cleared his throat. Fog's bad tonight, he said. It sounded like a warning. Visibility's poor, I agreed. That's not what I mean. Mac tapped the reverser, a nervous gesture. Fog makes it easier for them. Gives them cover. Them. I kept my voice level. You mean the walker? He didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached up and adjusted the wiper blade, clearing condensation from the windshield, even though we were getting new moisture immediately. Eyes on the consist log, he said. I'll watch the route, I wanted to argue. I wanted to prove that I could handle this run like an adult, not a spooked kid at a campfire. But something about the way Mac said it, the same flat, factual tone, made me comply. I dropped my gaze to the paperwork, checked the weight distribution, the brake system status, the car-by-car inventory, standard conductor duties. Nothing unusual. We passed mile 36, the signal showed yellow approach. Mac throttled back slightly. Mile 37. The fog pressed against the windows like something alive swirling in our passage. I could hear it somehow. A faint hiss against the locomotive's shell, though that should have been impossible over the engine noise. Mile 38. Caleb. Mac's voice was tight. Don't look out your window. And don't look at the side mirror. My hand stopped mid-notation on the log sheet. Why? Rule 4 is active. My heart kicked against my ribs. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to look, to verify, to see what Mac was seeing. I'd spent 31 years training myself to investigate, to question, to not take things on faith. But I remembered the pressure at the tunnel. The wrongness of it. I kept my eyes on the paperwork. It's on your side, Mac said quietly, walking the ballast. Keeping pace. I could feel my pupils dilating, my body trying to force peripheral vision to compensate for the direct gaze I was denying it. The urge to look was almost physical, an itch behind my eyeballs. What is it? I whispered. Don't know. Never looked long enough to be sure. Mac adjusted the throttle, maintaining speed, but it's always the same. Same coat, same gait. And it never stumbles, never falls behind. No matter how fast we go. The locomotive's engine thrummed beneath us. 19 miles per hour according to the speedometer. Not fast by highway standards, but too fast to walk. Certainly too fast to walk on the uneven surface of railroad ballast, those fist-sized rocks between the ties that shift and slide under every step. Seconds crawled past. My hands were white-knuckled on the edge of the logbook. Does it ever... I had to swallow. Does it ever try to get on the train? No. Mac's eyes never left the windshield. It just walks. Just wants to be seen, and if I acknowledge it, don't. The simplicity of the command was more frightening than any explanation could have been. I forced myself to keep working. Checked the next car's seal number, verified the cargo manifest. My handwriting was shaky, but I kept my eyes down. The fog seemed thicker now, pressing against the windows, with that strange hissing sound. I could feel the walker out there just beyond the glass, pacing us. Could almost sense the rhythm of its stride matching the locomotive's speed, step for step, as if it was tethered to us by some invisible thread. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Time felt elastic, stretching and compressing. It could have been 30 seconds or 5 minutes. All I knew was the paper beneath my hands and the presence outside, unseen but undeniable. Then Mac said, "It's gone." I looked up. My neck cracked from the tension. The fog was still thick, but the sensation, that awareness of something pacing us, had vanished like a switch had been thrown. Gone where? I asked. Mac shook his head. Nowhere, somewhere, it doesn't matter. We were approaching mile 39 now. Ahead, the signal showed green. Normal operations. Everything by the book, if you didn't count the figure that had just been walking impossible speed along the ballast. I set down the logbook and allowed myself, finally, to look out the side window. The fog swirled past. The headlights' glow caught the edges of trees, the shine of rail, the rough texture of the right-of-way. Nothing else. No footprints in the crushed rock, no disturbed ballast, no indication that anything had been there at all. "Mac," I said, "what did it look like?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, like someone who missed their train. The way he said it, with something like pity, made my skin crawl more than any description of a monster could have. We passed mile 40 without incident. Mile 41 approached, and I followed Mac's example from the previous night, keeping my eyes on the instruments as we entered the tunnel. The pressure returned, that invitation to look up, but it felt weaker this time. Or maybe I was just ready for it. We emerged on the far side, mile 42. The fog thinned slightly, and the world opened up enough to see the shapes of hills against the sky. At the next siding, Mac pulled us to a halt to wait for a southbound freight to pass. In the sudden quiet, just the tick of cooling metal and the distant howl of the other train's horn, he finally looked at me directly. "Now you know," he said. "The rules aren't a joke." I pulled the folded sheet from my pocket and read Rule 4 again. "If you see someone walking the ballast keeping pace with the train, do not acknowledge them. What happens if you do?" I asked. "Acknowledge them, I mean." Mac's jaw worked. "They acknowledge you back, and then they know your face." He pulled a fresh cup of coffee from his thermos, hands steady despite everything. "They know your schedule. They start showing up in other places. Not just mile 38. They start testing the other rules, seeing if you'll break those too." "Why?" "Because breaking the rules is how they get what they want." "Which is?" Mac looked out at the darkness, at the fog that was already closing back in as the other train's lights faded into the distance. "The same thing they've always wanted," he said. "Another chance." He didn't elaborate. He just released the air brakes and throttled up, and we rolled on toward Lowell's Ford. And I realized with perfect clarity that I'd just been initiated into something far older and stranger than a freight line in rural Pennsylvania. I'd been taught that some rules exist not because they make logical sense, but because the cost of breaking them was written in something other than policy manuals. It was written in the fog and the ballast, Scanned the figure that walked where nothing should be able to walk, and it was watching, waiting to see if I'd learned my lesson or if I'd be foolish enough to look next time. Tyler Keene transferred onto our crew during my 3rd week on the line. He was 26, compact and wiry, with the kind of energy that made every space feel smaller. He'd been working the eastern routes for 2 years, not long enough to be a veteran, but long enough to think he knew everything worth knowing. Within 5 minutes of meeting him, I'd learned he was saving up for a motorcycle, that he thought the railroad was a temporary gig before something better came along, and that he found the Nightline rules hilarious. Oh man, they got you with the spooky list. Tyler laughed when he saw me check the folded paper before our first shared shift. That's classic. Mac does that to everyone. We were in the crew ready room waiting for dispatch to clear us. Mac was outside doing the pre-trip inspection, which left Tyler free to hold court. It's all bullshit, Tyler continued, sprawling in one of the plastic chairs. Atmosphere, right? Keep the newbies nervous so they stay alert. I answered one of those ghost dispatchers last year, Rule 5, and absolutely nothing happened. I'm still here. I folded the rules back into my pocket. Maybe you got lucky. Nah. Tyler tipped his chair back on 2 legs. There's no ghosts on the railroad, man. Just track tonnage and tired guys telling stories to pass the time. I'd heard that logic before. I'd used it myself, actually, before my 2nd night, before the walker. But there was something about the casual certainty in Tyler's voice that made me uneasy. It wasn't confidence. It was the kind of bravado people use to paper over things they don't want to think about too hard. You ever work miles 36 through 42? I asked. The dark stretch? Sure, Tyler shrugged. It's just track. Creepy track, yeah, but that's because it's old. And the trees crowd in and your brain starts inventing shit. Pattern recognition, you know. We're wired to see faces in the shadows. The door opened and Mac stuck his head in. We're cleared. Let's roll. Tyler sprang up, all coiled energy. Let's do this. The first 2 hours of the run were routine. Tyler worked the rear of the consist, checking cargo and monitoring the brake system, while I stayed up front with Mac. The night was clearer than my previous shifts. No fog, just the crisp cold of late autumn, and a sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled salt across black paper. We made good time. The radio chatter was normal. Tyler came up to the cab twice, both times full of commentary about how boring the shift was, how the company should invest in better equipment, how he was planning to quit by spring. Mac ignored him with the patience of a man who'd seen 100 Tyler Keenes come and go. At mile 34, 2 miles before the dark stretch, Mac keyed the radio to dispatch. Eastern 46 approaching mile 36 requesting clearance. The radio crackled. Eastern 46, you're clear through to mile 50. Signals are active. No conflicting traffic. Copy that. Mac hung the mic back up and glanced at me. Eyes sharp, I nodded. Tyler, standing behind us, rolled his eyes. It's just track, guys. We passed mile 36. The trees thickened. The signal showed green, proceed. Everything normal, by conventional standards. But I felt it anyway. That subtle shift in pressure, like we'd passed through an invisible membrane into air with different density. Mile 37, mile 38. I kept my eyes forward, specifically not looking at the side window. Tyler noticed. You actually buy into that walker stuff? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. I follow the rules, I said carefully. That's not an answer. Mac's hand tightened on the throttle. Tyler, you got duties in the rear. Go check the consist. I just checked it. Check it again. Something in Mac's tone made even Tyler pause. He shrugged, muttered something I didn't catch, and headed back through the door into the next car. Mac waited until the door closed. Kid's going to get himself noticed, he said quietly. By what? Everything that's been trying not to notice us. Mile 40 came and went. I kept my eyes on the instruments as we approached the tunnel, felt that familiar pressure invitation wrongness, and we passed through without incident. Mile 42. We'd cleared the dark stretch. I was just starting to relax when the train began to brake. Not a gradual slowdown, an automatic air brake application, the kind that happens when the system detects something wrong or when approaching a scheduled stop. But we had no stop scheduled. Lowell's Ford was still 12 miles ahead. Mac checked the board. What the hell? The speed bled away. Outside, the landscape changed. I recognized it from the history I'd researched. Denton Station, or what was left of it. The platform was still there, a crumbling concrete slab maybe 40 feet long. The waiting room was a shell, windows broken out, roof sagging dangerously. Graffiti covered the walls. The usual stuff, names and dates and crude drawings. A sign that had once read Denton was still bolted to the platform's edge, though half the letters had fallen away. It read DTN now, which somehow made it worse. But the lights were on, that's what stopped my breath. The platform lights, old sodium vapor fixtures that should have been dead for decades, were glowing orange, casting sickly illumination over the empty platform, and 3 people were standing there. A woman with a small suitcase, wearing a dress that looked like something from a department store catalogue from the 70s, a man in a work coat, lunch pail at his feet, and a child, a boy, maybe 8 years old, clutching a toy. Some kind of wooden train, I thought, though it was hard to see clearly. They stood in a neat row, not looking at us, not looking at anything, just standing, as if waiting for a train that ran on a schedule that no longer existed. The locomotive rolled to a complete stop, air brakes hissing. We were perfectly aligned with the platform, as if we'd done this 100 times. I grabbed the rules sheet. Rule 3. Do not open doors for anyone at Denton Station after Rule 13. It's been closed since 78. I checked my watch. 0019, Mac, I said. We don't stop here. I know. His hands moved over the controls, but nothing responded. System thinks we're supposed to. The radio crackled. Eastern 46, do you have a situation? We're showing you stationary at mile 43. Mac keyed the mic. Dispatch, we've got an uncommanded brake application. Working the issue. Copy, keep us updated. In the rear cars I heard movement. Tyler, probably, coming to see why we'd stopped. The 3 figures on the platform still hadn't moved. Their clothes didn't stir in the wind that was rattling the broken windows of the waiting room. The boy's toy train was perfectly still in his hands. Tyler appeared in the cab doorway. What's going on? Brake issue, Max said, not looking at him. Stay inside. But Tyler was already looking past us through the windshield at the platform. At the figures. Holy shit, there's people out there. Are they waiting for us? No, I said, they've got luggage. That lady has a suitcase. Tyler moved toward the door controls. We should let them on. They probably think this line still runs. Tyler, don't. I stood up, heart hammering. We don't open the doors. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Dude, we can't just leave them out there. It's freezing. Tyler, Mac's voice was steel. Step away from the door. This is insane. But Tyler's hand was already on the manual release. They're just people. Probably rail fans or historians or something. This is exactly the kind of paranoid bullshit the rules are designed to. He pulled the lever. The door hissed open. Mac closed his eyes. God damn it. The 3 figures didn't move, didn't react. The door was open, the steps extended, the platform maybe 3 feet away. An easy step up. Tyler leaned out slightly. Hey, you folks need a ride? Silence. Just the wind and the distant creak of the ruined waiting room. Tyler, get back inside, I said. Now. They're right there, and then they moved, not walking. They were on the platform, and then they were in the car, and there was no transition between those 2 states. No footsteps on the metal steps. No sound of fabric brushing against the doorframe. They simply relocated from there to here, and Tyler stumbled backward with a gasp. The woman took a seat. The man took another. The boy sat between them. The wooden train still clutched in his small hands. They didn't look at us. Didn't look at anything. Their eyes were open but fixed on nothing, like mannequins. Tyler was breathing hard. How did they... Close the door, Mac said. Close it now. Tyler slapped the control panel. The door hissed shut. The steps retracted. Mac released the brake and the locomotive lurched forward. The platform lights went dark behind us all at once, as if someone had thrown a breaker. We rolled in silence for 30 seconds. Then I grabbed the consist log and headed for the rear cars. Caleb. Don't, Mac called. But I was already through the door. The forward passenger car was empty except for the usual scatter of discarded newspapers and a smell like stale coffee. I moved through to the rear car where we'd seen the figures board. Nothing. Every seat was empty. No woman, no man, no child. No luggage, no lunch pail. No wooden train. But there were 3 damp spots on the fabric seats in the exact positions where they'd been sitting. Dark patches soaking into the cushions. I touched one, ice cold. And the dampness wasn't water, it was condensation, like they'd been made of frozen air and had started to melt. I checked the car's weight sensor system, the electronic scale that measures how much mass is on board to calculate brake pressure. The reading hadn't changed, no weight gain when they'd boarded. As far as the train was concerned, those three had never existed. I walked back to the cab on legs that felt like rubber. Tyler was sitting on the floor, back against the bulkhead, arms wrapped around his knees. His face was white. "They weren't there," he said. I looked right where they sat. They weren't there. Mac kept his eyes on the rails. "No," he said. "They weren't. Then what?" "They've been waiting since 1978, Mac said flatly. "Still waiting for a train that'll actually take them somewhere. That's impossible." "You opened the door, Tyler." Mac's voice was tired. "So tired. You broke Rule 3, now they know this train stops at Denton. They'll be waiting again, next time. And the time after that. For what?" Mac didn't answer. He just throttled up, and we rolled on through the darkness toward Lowell's Ford. And in my pocket, the rules sheet felt heavier than paper should ever feel. Behind us, miles back now, the platform lights of Denton Station flickered once more and went dark. But the woman and the man and the boy stayed where they were, standing in perfect formation, suitcase and lunch pail and wooden train, waiting for the next time someone was foolish enough to believe the rules were just stories, waiting for a conductor who'd make the mistake of letting them try again and again, forever. After Tyler's incident at Denton, I couldn't let it go. The rational part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through school, through my father's illness, through the breakup with Sarah, by reducing every problem to component parts I could address, kept trying to process what I'd seen. 3 figures. Impossible movement. Seats wet with condensation. No weight registration. It violated every law of physics I understood, and yet I'd witnessed it. Mac had witnessed it. Even Tyler, for all his skepticism, couldn't deny what had happened. There had to be an explanation, a history, something that made sense of the rules. So I started digging. The crew ready room at the yard had a locker that everyone ignored, one of those old steel units shoved into a corner. Paint flaking, combination lock rusted but still functional. I'd seen other conductors glance at it and look away, the same way you'd avert your eyes from a homeless man on the street. Deliberate unseeing. After my shift the following night, when the ready room was empty and the yard quiet, I tried the lock. It opened on the first attempt. No combination needed. Someone had left it unlocked, or it had been unlocked for so long it had simply given up. Inside, beneath old company bulletins and forgotten lunch bags fossilized with age, I found a ledger. It was bound in cracked leather, pages yellowed and brittle, with Conductor's Log Eastern Division, stamped on the cover in faded gold. The entries dated back to 1962, handwritten observations in different scripts as conductors rotated through, each adding their experiences to a record. That was clearly unofficial, personal, secret. Took it to a table under the flickering, fluorescent light and started reading. The early entries were routine, weather observations, minor equipment malfunctions, passenger counts, but around 1975 the tone shifted. Words like unusual and unexplained started appearing. Margin notes in tight, nervous handwriting, December 3rd, 1975. Walker appeared at mile 38. Davis looked directly. Requested transfer next day, March 17th, 1976. All signals green between 36:42. Treated as stop per protocol. Dispatcher claimed signals showed proper aspects on their board. July 22nd, 1977. Denton platform lights active despite power disconnection confirmed by maintenance. No action taken. Then February 1978. The entries became frantic. February 8th, 1978. Near miss at mile 41. Opposing train not on schedule. Dispatcher had no record of it. February 10th, 1978. Tunnel echo wrong. Hearing 2 engines, but we're alone. February 14th, 1978. Request denied for signal inspection. Company says everything nominal. And then February 16th, 1978. An entry in a different hand, shaky letters. They hit. Oh God, they hit. Head on just past the tunnel. We tried to warn them. The signals all went green. Both trains thought they had clearance. Heard it on the radio, screaming. Metal, then nothing. Death toll 23, crew of both trains plus passengers on the eastbound. Names listed below, I scanned the list. Most names meant nothing to me. But then, near the bottom, Robert Hart, conductor, westbound freight Hart, my last name. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and searched the name plus the accident date. Found a scanned newspaper article from the Scranton Times. Small piece, page 6. Fatal train collision near Lowell's Ford. Signals blamed. The article included a grainy photo. 2 locomotives crumpled together like accordions. Freight cars jackknifed, passenger coach on its side. The caption identified the location, Mile 41, Eastern Division. And there in the list of deceased was the name again. Robert Hart, age 54, conductor with 20 years experience. I searched my family tree on my phone. Found him. My great-uncle, my grandfather's brother. A man I'd never met, who died 11 years before I was born. I'd taken a job on the same line where my relative had been killed. I sat back. The ready room suddenly too small. The fluorescent lights too bright. This wasn't coincidence. Couldn't be. I kept reading. The entries after February 78 were different, procedural, cold, as if whoever was writing had shut down emotionally to copied at February 20th, 1978. Denton Station removed from timetable. Platform remains. Passengers reported by multiple crews. March 1978. New protocols established for mile 3642 segment. Unofficial but unanimous. April 1978. Walker sightings increase. Theory, collision left residue, impression loop. That word, loop, appeared again and again. Crews describing time anomalies. Clocks reading the same minute twice. Radio calls that overlapped with themselves. The sensation of the train shuddering sideways, like a strong wind where no wind existed. One entry, from October 1980, was underlined so hard the pen had torn through the paper. The line is trying to finish what it started. The collision never completely happened in the way physics wanted. Something went wrong with wrong. It stuck, and it wants us to help it complete. The margins of the later pages were full of observations that made my scalp prickle. After the 78 collision, we never pulled Denton from the line, not really. The ones who died still expect their train. Walker on the ballast matches speed, don't call out. Acknowledging gives it place, makes it more real. Tunnel at 41, first headlight pass shows not just rail ahead, but where we would have been in 78 if brakes failed. If all signals go green together in the dark stretch, something's trying to clear the way back to the moment. Clipped to the back pages, yellowed with age, was the newspaper photo I'd found on my phone. But this was the full version, uncropped. I could see the background. Emergency workers, onlookers, the scatter of debris, and in the very edge of the frame, almost invisible, a figure standing alone on the ballast. Too distant to make out features, but the posture was distinct. Long coat, hands at sides, facing the wreckage. The same figure I'd refused to look at in my peripheral vision at mile 38. Someone had written in the margin beside the photo, "It was there before." It's still there now. Watching the moment. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly closed the ledger, shoving it back in the locker. One of the yard workers passed by without glancing in, but my heart was hammering like I'd been caught committing a crime. I pulled out the Nightline rules sheet and looked at it with new understanding. These weren't superstitions. They were protocols developed through trial and error and loss to prevent the line from pulling anyone else into the unfinished collision. The Walker, the tunnel, the Denton passengers, the dispatcher voice without a call sign. They were all part of the same system, the same event that had never quite finished collapsing, trying again and again to complete itself, and it wanted a conductor. Specifically, it seemed a heart. My great-uncle Robert had been westbound when he died. I was running the same route, the same shifts, the same stretch of track. The line had a memory, and memory, I was beginning to understand, wasn't just passive recording. Memory could be hungry. I left the ready room and walked out into the yard. The night was cold and clear, stars hard as diamonds overhead. In the distance I could hear a train horn, mournful, fading, a sound I'd once found romantic. Now it just sounded like a warning. I had two choices. I could request a transfer, get off this route, let someone else run the dark stretch. Or I could keep going, keep following the rules, and try to understand what Robert Hart had died trying to prevent. The smart choice was obvious. But I thought about Mac, running this line for 30 years, carrying the weight of knowledge that most people would call insanity. I thought about the ledger, decades of conductors adding their observations, trying to make sense of something that defied sense. I thought about the 3 figures at Denton, still waiting, trapped in 1978's amber. I thought about the rules, and how they were all that stood between the living and whatever was coiled in the miles between 36 and 42, patient as stone, waiting for the conditions to align. I pulled out my phone and called Mac. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. "You found the ledger," he said. "Not a question, yeah. And I need you to tell me everything," I said. "Not the rules, not the protocol, everything." Silence on the line. "Then, meet me at the Wayside Diner. 1 hour." He hung up. I stood in the empty yard, surrounded by silent locomotives and sleeping freight cars, and understood that I'd just made the choice. Not the smart one, the necessary one, because if the line had remembered Robert Hart and if I was running his route, then I was already part of this. The question wasn't whether I'd be tested, the question was whether I'd pass. The Wayside Diner sat at a crossroads 3 miles from the rail yard, the kind of place that had been serving coffee and eggs to railroad workers since before anyone could remember. Faded white paint, a neon sign that only half worked, booths with cracked vinyl. It was 3:30 when I walked in, and Mac was already there, sitting in the back corner with 2 cups of coffee waiting. He looked older in the diner's harsh light. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. The lines around his eyes, the grey in his stubble, the way his shoulders carried weight that had nothing to do with physical labor. I slid into the booth across from him. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The diner was empty, except for a cook in the back and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Finally, Mac pushed one of the coffee cups toward me. "You read the whole ledger?" "Most of it, enough. Then you know about your uncle." "Great-uncle," I said. "Robert Hart, February 16th, 1978. Mac nodded slowly. "I was there." My hand stopped halfway to the coffee cup. "You were not on one of the trains." "I was working signals that night, ground crew. 22 years old, thought I knew everything." He stared into his coffee like it held answers. "I was the one who saw the aspects go wrong. The signals. All green. Every mast between mile 36 and 42 all at once. Both directions." His voice was flat, reciting facts. "That's impossible. The system's designed with blocks. You can't have green in both directions on the same track. It's literally wired to prevent it." But that night, for about 90 seconds, every signal said, "Proceed." "Both trains thought they had clearance," I said quietly. Both dispatchers confirmed green aspects. Both engineers were following protocol. Nobody broke the rules. Nobody made a mistake. Mac's hands tightened around his cup. But the line wanted them to meet. At mile 41, just past the tunnel, head on. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket, old, preserved in plastic now, an incident report. I scanned it. Official cause, signal system malfunction. Recommended changes, complete system overhaul, additional fail-safes, new protocols. "They fixed the signals," Mac said. "Spent 6 months rebuilding the entire system between mile 30 and 50. Knew everything. Federal inspectors signed off. It was perfect. But the signals still show all green sometimes. Just for a few seconds. Just in the dark stretch." He looked up at me. "Because it's not the equipment that's broken, Caleb. It's the place. The cook dropped something in the kitchen, and we both flinched." "I don't understand," I said. "How can a place be broken?" "The collision happened," Mac said slowly. "But it also didn't, not completely. The trains hit, people died, that's real. But the moment of impact, the actual instant where 2 objects occupy the same space, something about it failed to resolve. Like a computer program crashing mid-execution. The collision started but never quite finished processing. That's not possible." "No," Mac agreed. "It's not, but it's happening anyway." He pulled out a napkin and drew a rough diagram, 2 lines converging, a circle where they met. Mile 41 tunnel exit. Both trains at full speed, both thinking they had clearance. The physics says they hit and stop. Energy converts to heat, sound deformation, conservation of momentum. Clean equation. He tapped the circle. But witnesses, the few who survived in the rear cars, they all said the same thing. The instant before impact, they felt the train shudder sideways. Not forward, not back. sideways, like something tried to push them out of the collision path but only managed to shift them part way. What does that mean? It means the line tried to prevent it, and failed. And now it's stuck in that failure, trying over and over to either complete the collision or undo it. Mac's voice dropped. Every night we run this route. We're passing through the echo of February 16th, 1978, and the echo is trying to get someone to help it finish. I thought about the walker keeping pace with the train, the Denton passengers waiting for a ride that would take them somewhere, the pressure at the tunnel inviting me to look. That's why the rules exist, I said. The rules keep us from giving the echo what it needs. Mac finished his coffee in one swallow. Don't look at the tunnel mouth, because if you do, you see both versions. The tunnel as it is, and the tunnel as it was the instant before impact, with another train's headlight coming through. Your brain can't process that. Some conductors who looked, they never stopped seeing it. Even when they weren't on the line. Don't acknowledge the walker, because the walker is the moment given form. It's the collision's awareness of itself, trying to find someone who will validate its existence. The more you acknowledge it, the more real it becomes, the stronger its ability to influence events. And Denton? Mac's jaw tightened. Denton was on the westbound schedule. Your uncle's train. They were supposed to stop and pick up passengers. 3 of them were on the platform when the collision happened. They heard it, saw the fireball, and they're still waiting for Robert Hart's train to complete its run. The weight of that hit me like a physical thing. They died? Shock, they think. Or maybe just... The moment took them. They were too close to the echo. Now they're part of it. He met my eyes. And when Tyler opened the door, he told them they could board. He gave them permission. Now they think every train that comes through is theirs. How do we fix this? We don't. Mac said it with the finality of a man who'd spent 30 years trying. We contain it. We follow the rules. We don't give the moment what it wants, which is another collision. The chance to finish right this time, or to prevent itself entirely. Mac leaned forward. The line is stuck in paradox, Caleb. It wants both. And every time someone breaks the rules, they give it a little more room to try. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out a second sheet, a continuation of the Nightline rules I'd been given. This one had 2 additional protocols in Mac's handwriting. If you hear dispatcher orders telling you to make up time between mile 3642, ignore them. Dispatch never says that anymore. If your watch or phone reads the same time twice in a row, even though seconds passed, do not report your location on the radio for the next 2 miles. These aren't on the original. I said I added them. 10 years ago, after a conductor named Sarah Chen almost got pulled in. Mac's face was grim. She followed a dispatcher order to increase speed through the dark stretch. Said they were behind schedule. Only problem, we weren't behind schedule, and dispatch never gave that order. But she heard it. She heard what the moment wanted her to hear. Voice sounded right. Call sign sounded right. But when she accelerated, the signals all went green and her clock started showing 23:47, the exact time the collision happened in 78. What stopped her? Her engineer, old hand named Garrett. He'd been on the line since the 80s. He recognized what was happening and cut the throttle, brought them down to restricted speed. Mac traced a line on the napkin diagram. The moment lost its chance. But Sarah never ran the line again. Said she could still hear that voice sometimes, telling her to make up time. I stared at the 2 new rules. Why does the line learn our voices? Because it's not a place anymore, Caleb. It's a question that won't stop asking itself. Mac's voice was quiet. What if the signals had been different? What if someone had slowed down? What if someone had seen the other train in time? It's asking that question every night, trying every variable, waiting for a conductor who'll say yes to the wrong answer. And it wants me specifically because you're a Hart. Because Robert Hart was the westbound conductor, the one who could have stopped if he'd known. The moment remembers him. It's been waiting 46 years for another Hart to run this line. Mac met my eyes. It thinks you might give it a different ending. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, a semi rolled past on the highway, its Jake brake rattling the windows. I could transfer, I said. You could. Mac didn't sound like he was judging. A lot of conductors do once they understand. Nobody would blame you. But the line will still be here. And someone else will run it. Someone who doesn't have your reason to be careful. He paused. Someone who might not understand why the rules matter until it's too late. I thought about Tyler's hand on the door control at Denton, about the three figures waiting on the platform, forever caught in 1978, about the walker pacing the ballast, and the voice on the radio that wasn't dispatch, and the tunnel that showed two versions of the same moment overlapping. What happens if someone gives the moment what it wants? I asked. Mac was quiet for a long time. Then I don't know. Maybe another collision. Maybe everyone involved gets pulled into the Echo permanently, joining the walker and the Denton passengers. Or maybe, he stopped, maybe what? Maybe the moment finally resolves. The collision finishes or unhappens, and everyone trapped in it gets released. Mac's voice was barely above a whisper. But I've never been willing to bet lives on maybe. He stood up, leaving a $10 bill on the table. You've got 2 nights off. Think about what you want to do. If you come back, I'll keep running with you. If you don't, I'll understand. And if I come back? Mac smiled, but it was the saddest expression I'd ever seen. Then I'll teach you the rest. The parts that aren't written down. The parts you only learn by surviving them. He walked out into the pre-dawn darkness, and I sat alone in the booth with 2 coffee cups and a napkin diagram of paradox. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister, miss you. When are you visiting? I looked at it for a long moment, then put the phone away. Robert Hart had died trying to run a schedule, following every rule he knew, and it hadn't been enough. The moment had taken him anyway, and now it was asking me the same question it had been asking for 46 years. What if someone did it differently? What if someone gave it the answer it wanted? I folded the new rules into my pocket next to the original sheet and walked out into the parking lot. The sky was turning grey at the edges, stars fading. In a few hours the sun would rise, and the world would be ordinary and explicable and safe. But tonight, after dark, I'd be back in the cab of Eastern 46, rolling toward mile 41 because Mac was right. Someone had to run the line, and if it was going to be asking for a heart, better it got one who knew the rules. I came back, of course I came back. I'd like to say it was courage or duty or some noble sense of responsibility, but the truth is simpler and uglier. I was already caught. The moment I'd read Robert Hart's name in that ledger, I'd become part of the story. Walking away wouldn't have changed that. The line knew who I was. Better to face it with knowledge than to spend the rest of my life wondering when it would reach for me. My first shift back, Mac said nothing about my decision. Just handed me the thermos of coffee and started the pre-trip checklist. But I caught him looking at me once as we pulled out of the yard, and something in his expression looked like relief. Or maybe recognition. Another conductor who'd chosen to stay. For 3 nights, we ran the line without major incident. The walker appeared twice. I kept my eyes on the consist log both times. The Denton platform lights activated once, but we maintained speed and didn't stop. Tyler had been reassigned to a different route. I didn't ask if that was his choice or management's. The mile 41 tunnel pulled at me, with that familiar pressure invitation each time, and each time I kept my gaze on the instruments until we were through. We were learning each other's rhythms, Mac and I. The silences between us grew comfortable. He showed me the subtle tells, how the radio static changed texture in the dark stretch, how the ballast reflected light differently near mile 38, how to read the quality of the darkness itself for signs of wrongness. Most conductors never develop the sensitivity, he told me on the 3rd night. They follow the rules by rote, and that's enough. But if you pay attention, you can feel when the moment is close. When it's testing, how? Pressure in your ears. Taste like copper on your tongue. And time feels sticky, like you're pushing through something thicker than air. I'd felt all of those things and had attributed them to stress, imagination, lack of sleep. Now I understood they were early warnings. The moment announcing itself. On the 4th night, fog returned. It settled into the valleys like liquid, turning the world into layers of grey and black. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The headlight beam diffused into a glow that revealed more than it illuminated. Mac throttled back to restricted speed, 15 miles per hour, and activated the forward-facing camera, though I noticed he didn't actually watch the screen. His eyes stayed on the windshield as if he was reading something I couldn't see. Bad night for it, he muttered as we approached mile 36. For what? He didn't answer. Just keyed the radio. Eastern 46 approaching dark stretch. Restricted speed due to visibility. Copy Eastern 46, dispatch responded. No conflicting traffic. Proceed with caution. We entered the stretch. The fog pressed against the windows, and I felt it immediately, that thickness Mac had described. Like the air had gained viscosity. My ears popped. Mile 37. The trees were invisible, just suggestions in the murk. The rails ahead looked like they were dissolving into nothing. Mile 38. No walker tonight, or if there was one, the fog hid it. Small mercy. Mile 39. Mac's hands tightened on the throttle. I glanced at him. His jaw was set, eyes fixed ahead with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "What is it?" I asked. "Signals," he said quietly. I looked at the next mast, barely visible through the fog. Green. Then the one after it. Also green, and the next. Green, all of them. Every signal we could see, all showing proceed. Rule 2. If the signal boards between mile 36-42 all show green at once, treat it as a stop. Mac, I see it. He was already throttling down, applying brake. The moment's asking. The train slowed. 10 miles per hour. 5. The fog swirled around us, and I had the eerie sensation that we weren't moving through it. It was moving around us. Like we were stationary and the world was rotating past. Then I tasted copper. Sharp and bright on my tongue. Mac, I know. His voice was tight. My watch read 23:47, the same time as the collision. I checked it again. Still 23:47. Seconds had passed, but the numbers hadn't changed. Rule 7. If your watch reads the same time twice in a row, even though seconds passed, do not report your location on the radio for the next 2 miles. My hand moved toward the radio mic. Mac grabbed my wrist. Don't. I wasn't. You were thinking about it. Don't even think about it. His grip was iron. The moment can feel in tension. We were crawling now, maybe 3 miles per hour, the locomotive barely moving. And ahead, through the fog, the tunnel mouth of mile 41 began to materialize. But something was wrong with it. The tunnel had always been a simple bore. Dark circle cut through the ridge, single track, utilitarian. But now in the fog it looked doubled. Like a photograph with ghosting, 2 images slightly offset. 2 tunnel mouths overlapping but not quite aligned, and in one of them I could see light, not our headlight reflecting back. Another light, coming toward us from inside the tunnel. Another train's headlight, Mac. My voice sounded distant in my own ears. There's something in the tunnel. I know. He'd brought us to a complete stop now, air brakes hissing. Don't look at it directly. Rule 1. But I couldn't stop seeing it in my peripheral vision. That light growing brighter, closer. The other train that should have been there in 1978, approaching on the same track. Both trains thinking they had clearance, both seeing green signals, both... The radio crackled. Eastern 46, you're showing stationary at mile 40. Do you have a situation? The voice was wrong. Too clear, too present, and there had been no call sign. Rule 5. If the dispatcher's voice comes over the radio without a call sign, do not respond. Mac didn't reach for the mic. The radio crackled again. Eastern 46, confirm your status. You need to proceed at speed to clear the block. You're behind schedule. Make up time through the tunnel. Rule 6. If you hear dispatcher orders telling you to make up time between mile 36-42, ignore them. My hand twitched toward the throttle. We were stopped. We were vulnerable. Every instinct in me screamed to move, to accelerate, to get through the tunnel and away from whatever was building around us. Mac's hand clamped on mine. No, we're sitting ducks. That's what it wants you to think. The light in the tunnel was closer now. I could almost see the shape of the locomotive behind it, a dark mass approaching. And the fog around us had developed texture, like I was seeing currents in it, patterns that resembled movement ahead, on the tracks. Through the fog directly in front of our train, a small figure resolved into clarity. The boy from Denton Station. He stood on the rails maybe 30 feet ahead, clutching his wooden train toy, staring directly at our locomotive. His clothes were from another era. Corduroy pants, a winter coat with a broken zipper, scuffed shoes. He couldn't have been more than 8 years old, and he wasn't moving. Just standing, waiting. Oh God, I whispered. Mac, there's a kid on the tracks. I see him. We have to... I reached for the air horn, for the radio, for anything. We have to warn him, we have to... It's not real, Caleb. Mac's voice was steady, but I heard the tremor underneath. It's the moment. Kurt's showing you what you expect to see. That's a child. It's what happened to him in '78. He was on the platform at Denton, and he saw the collision. The shock killed him. Now he's part of the Echo, and the Echo is using him. Mac's grip on my arm was crushing. If we brake for him, if we dump the air and stop, we recreate the exact conditions. The train's too close. The signal's green. The tunnel waiting. That's what the moment needs to finish. The boy's face tilted up. Even through the fog, I could see his expression. Not fear, not pleading. Something else. Something old and patient and wrong. His mouth opened. It kept opening. Wider than any human mouth should open, jaw unhinging like a snake's, and the sound that came out wasn't a child's voice. It was metal on metal. It was the screech of brakes that engaged too late. It was the compressed moment of impact, stretched into audio, and underneath it words, "Help us finish." Every nerve in my body fired at once. My hand slammed down on the air brake valve, the emergency dump that would stop us immediately, the absolute override. Mac tore my hand away. "No, there's a child on the tracks." I was shouting now, rational thought dissolving. We can't just hit him. It's not there, Caleb." Mac grabbed my shoulders, forced me to look at him instead of the windshield. "Listen to me. Your uncle saw the same thing. The report said he applied emergency brake right before impact. That's why the westbound was going slower. He was trying to stop for something on the tracks. But there was nothing there. It was the moment, showing him what would make him slow down just enough to be in the exact wrong place. Tears were streaming down my face. "I can't. You have to." Mac's eyes were red. "This is the test. This is what the line has been building to. It's asking you, will you trust the rules or will you trust what you see? What if it's real? What if there's actually a child and Then we hit him," Mac said, and his voice broke. "And we live with that. But if we stop, if we give the moment what it wants, we don't just kill ourselves. We kill everyone else the line will reach for after us. Everyone who'll board at Denton, thinking they're getting on a real train. Everyone who'll hear the wrong dispatcher voice and follow bad orders. The boy, the thing, stood motionless on the rails. The wooden train in its hands was rotating now, wheels turning on their own faster and faster until they blurred. Behind us, I heard something. The other train. The one in the tunnel. Its horn, distorted, wrong, like it was playing backward and forward simultaneously. Mac released me. "Your choice, Caleb, but choose now." I looked at the boy. At the tunnel with its doubled mouth and its approaching impossible light. At the signals all showing green. At my watch still reading 23:47. At the rules folded in my pocket. I thought about Robert Hart, seeing this same thing 46 years ago, applying his brakes because he couldn't do anything else, because every human instinct demanded he try to save a child, and dying for it, and maybe in some way knowing he would die and doing it anyway, because that's what being human meant. But I also thought about Mac, about 30 years of running this line, making this choice every time the moment asked, about the ledger full of names, about Tyler opening the door at Denton, about how many small yeses it would take before the moment finally got its completion. I put my hand on the throttle. Mac watched me. Said nothing. I released the brake. Applied power. The locomotive shuddered and began to move forward. Toward the boy. "It's not there," I whispered. "It's not there, it's not there, it's not there." The locomotive rolled forward. 5 miles per hour. 10. The boy stayed motionless, mouth still open in that impossible scream-screech plea. 15 miles per hour. 20 feet away, I couldn't watch. I closed my eyes. Felt the train accelerate. Felt the moment stretch like taffy. Time losing coherence. 10 feet. 5. A metallic thud from beneath the locomotive. Something grabbing the undercarriage, holding on, scraping along the bottom. And then we were through. Into the tunnel. The pressure released all at once, my ears popping so hard I cried out. The taste of copper vanished. My watch jumped forward. 23:49, then 23:50, time unfreezing. Mac let out a breath he'd been holding for what seemed like minutes. We emerged from the tunnel. Mile 42. The fog was already thinning. The signals behind us, I saw in the rear camera, were showing proper aspects now. Red, yellow, normal sequencing. I opened my eyes. The rails ahead were empty. No boy, no wooden train. Just track and ballast and the ordinary darkness of rural Pennsylvania. But that thud, that scraping sound, what was that? I asked. My voice was shaking. Under the train. What grabbed on? Mac didn't answer for a long moment. Then, the moment. Trying one more time. It'll let go eventually. How do you know? Because we're still moving. Because we're past mile 42. Because... He stopped, listening. The scraping sound had faded. Because it only gets to try when we're in its territory. The radio crackled. Normal dispatch now with proper call sign, asking for our updated position. Mac responded calmly, professionally, like we'd just run the most routine stretch of track imaginable. But his hands were shaking on the throttle. You did good, he said quietly. You chose right. I didn't feel like I'd chosen right. I felt like I'd violated something fundamental. Like I'd broken a covenant older than the rules Mac had given me. The boy's face, the thing's face, was burned into my vision. I'd see it every time I closed my eyes. Does it get easier? I asked. No, Mac said. But you learn to carry it. We rolled on toward Lowell's Ford in silence, and I understood with terrible clarity that I'd just passed through a threshold. I'd been tested and I'd survived, but survival had a cost. Somewhere in the dark stretch behind us, the moment was resetting itself. The boy would return to his position on the tracks. The signals would wait for their chance to all turn green. The tunnel would prepare its doubled mouth, and the next time the test might be different, might be harder. The line was patient, and it was learning what would break me. 3 weeks passed. Normal runs, if anything on the Eastern Division could be called normal. The walker appeared. The Denton lights activated twice. The tunnel pulled at my eyes each time we approached, but there were no full-scale tests, no moments as intense as the boy on the tracks. I should have known that was just the line-building pressure. The storm came on a Thursday, not the gentle rain we'd been getting all week, but a full system rolling in from the west, wind that bent trees horizontal, lightning that strobed the ridges, rain so heavy the wipers couldn't keep up. Dispatch considered canceling the run, but the manifest included medical supplies for Lowell's Ford's clinic, and they decided we should attempt it. Mac and I stood in the yard office watching the weather radar. The system was massive, a solid line of red and purple stretching across 3 states. We can refuse, Mac said. Safety protocols allow it. Do you want to refuse? He looked at me for a long moment. No, but I want you to understand what we're walking into. Storms make the boundary thinner. The moment can push harder when conditions are already unstable. You think tonight's the night it really tries? I think tonight everything we've been doing, following the rules, staying alert, not giving it openings, all of that gets tested at once. Mac zipped up his jacket. If we go ready. No distractions. No hesitation. We see anything wrong, anything at all, we treat it as hostile. I nodded, checked my pocket for the rules sheet, even though I'd long since memorized every word. Then let's go. The pre-trip inspection was hurried, both of us getting soaked despite rain gear. The consist was minimal. 2 locomotives, 3 freight cars, 1 passenger coach that I suspected would stay empty. Who would travel in this weather? We fired up the lead unit and rolled out at 22:30. The storm hit full force as we cleared the yard, wind buffeting the locomotive hard enough that I could feel it sway. Rain hammered the windshield. Visibility was maybe 20 feet. The first 30 miles took twice as long as usual. Mac ran us at restricted speed, and even then I worried about washouts, debris on the tracks, the 1,000 things that could go wrong in weather like this. Lightning cracked overhead close enough to make the radio sputter, but the line held. The track drained properly. We kept moving. At mile 34, 2 miles before the dark stretch, Tyler's voice crackled over the radio. I grabbed the mic before thinking. Tyler, what are you... Mac's hand clamped over mine. He shook his head sharply. The radio crackled again. Caleb, man, I need help. I'm stuck at Denton. The signals are all wrong. Dispatch told me to wait for you guys, but... Static. Something's wrong. Something's on the platform with me. Rule 5. If the dispatcher's voice comes over the radio without a call sign, do not respond. But this wasn't dispatch. This was Tyler, a crew member. Someone we knew, Mac, I said. If he's really there, he's not. Mac's voice was iron. Tyler was reassigned to the western routes. He's nowhere near here. And Denton doesn't have radio coverage. The towers don't reach. Then what? It's the moment, Mac said. Using a voice you'll trust. Using someone you'll want to help. The radio to Caleb, please. I can see them. The woman and the boy. They're just standing there and a sound like sobbing. I think they know I opened the door. I think they're waiting for me to... Mac grabbed the radio and switched it to a different channel. The voice cut off mid-sentence. You can't save ghosts, Mac said, no matter whose voice they use. We entered the dark stretch, mile 36. The storm intensified. Wind screamed around the locomotive. Lightning hit something close, a tree maybe, and the flash was so bright I saw after-images. Thunder rolled through, felt more than heard. Mile 37, my watch read 23:45, normal time so far. But the pressure was building. That thickness in the air, the copper taste, the sensation of pushing through something resistant. Mile 38. The walker was there. I saw it in a lightning flash, standing on the ballast on my side. Keeping pace, coat whipping in wind that should have knocked anyone down. It turned its head toward the window. Toward me. For a split second I saw its face, Robert Hart's face, my great-uncle. The photograph from the newspaper, but animated, alive, mouth moving in words I couldn't hear. I looked away, kept my eyes on the instruments, hands shaking. Rule 4. If you see someone walking the ballast keeping pace with the train, do not acknowledge them. Mile 39. The radio, still on the alternate channel, crackled to life. Not Tyler's voice this time. Dispatch, professional, calm. Eastern 46, be advised you need to increase speed. Severe weather moving in behind you. Make up time through mile 40 to 42 to stay ahead of the front. No call sign. Rule 6. If you hear dispatcher orders telling you to make up time between mile 36-42, ignore them. Mac didn't respond. Didn't even reach for the mic. I checked my watch. 23:47, checked it again. Still 23:47. Rule 7. If your watch reads the same time twice in a row, do not report your location. Here we go, Mac muttered. The signals ahead all flicked to green. Every mast I could see through the rain and darkness. All green. All proceed. Rule 2. If the signal boards between mile 36-42 all show green at once, treat it as a stop. Mac brought us down to a crawl. 5 miles per hour. The wind shrieked. Lightning strobed continuously now, turning the world into a series of freeze frames. And in one of those flashes, I saw it. Another train, superimposed over our own, like a double-exposure photograph. I could see through it, but it was there. A different locomotive, different consist, rolling on the same track in the opposite direction. Coming toward us, the westbound from 1978, Robert Hart's train. Mac, I see it. His voice was tight. Don't look directly. Don't validate it. But I couldn't stop seeing it in the windshield's reflection. The other train getting closer, seconds from collision. Both of us occupying the same space and time, but somehow not. Like we were phasing in and out of each other's reality. Mile 40. The tunnel mouth appeared ahead. But like before, it was doubled. 2 entrances overlapping, and I could see light in both. Our headlight in one. Another train's headlight in the other. The radio desperately. Eastern 46, you are ordered to proceed at maximum speed. Clear the tunnel before... Static, then a different voice, older. Stop, stop, there's oncoming, I can see the headlight, we're going to... That was Robert Hart's voice. The last transmission before the collision. 46 years old, playing again. My hand moved to the throttle. Every instinct screaming to accelerate, to outrun this, to get through the tunnel and away. Mac's hand covered mine. Slow. We go slow. No matter what. The pressure was crushing now. My ears hurt. The taste of copper was so strong I thought I'd vomit. Outside, the world was coming apart. The storm. The lightning, the overlapping trains. All of it blending into chaos. And then the door behind us opened. I spun around. Tyler stood in the doorway, soaked, terrified. Thank God. I thought... He stumbled into the cab. Something's wrong with this train. I was in the passenger car and he wasn't real. Couldn't be real, but he looked real. Sounded real. Moved like a person, not an apparition. Tyler, I said carefully, what are you doing here? I was assigned to this run. Don't you remember? I came on at Scranton. He moved toward the control panel. Guys, we need to get out of here. I saw something back there. Something in the tunnel. We need to reverse. We need to... His hand reached for the reverser. The control that would put us in reverse, send us backward out of the dark stretch. Mac lunged and grabbed his wrist. Don't touch the controls. Tyler's face twisted. "What are you—" "You're not Tyler," Max said. "Tyler isn't on this train. Tyler isn't on this route." For a moment, Tyler's face remained normal, confused, human. Then it changed. The features stayed the same, but something underneath shifted. The expression became wrong. Angles that didn't match the emotion, eyes that focused too intently. Like a mask with something else looking through. "Let me help you," Tyler said. But the voice was layered now, multiple tones at once. "Let me fix this. Let me finish this." "No," Max said. The Tyler thing smiled. "Your uncle said no too. Right before the end. Right before he tried to stop for the boy." It leaned closer. "Do you think he screamed?" I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. We were seconds from the tunnel. The doubled locomotive visible in the windshield. The moment converging on itself. 46 years of paradox trying to collapse into resolution. And I understood. This was it. The ultimate test. Not just one rule being challenged, but all of them at once. The walker wearing my uncle's face. The fake dispatcher orders. The time loop. The green signals. The false crew member trying to manipulate the controls. Every tool the moment had thrown at us simultaneously. It wanted us to break. Wanted us to do something, anything, other than follow the protocols. Because if we gave it even one opening, it would have what it needed to finish. "Mac," I said. "What do we do?" He was staring at the Tyler thing, jaw set. "We do nothing. We follow the rules, but we stay the course. Maintain speed. Don't respond to the radio. Don't report our position. Don't open doors. Don't acknowledge anything outside. And—" he shoved the Tyler thing away from the controls. "We don't let ghosts drive the train." The thing wearing Tyler's face screamed. Not a human sound. The same metal screech the boy had made. The sound of collision, of impact, of the moment trying to express itself. It lunged at Mac. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount and swung. The extinguisher passed through the Tyler thing like it was made of fog. It dispersed, reformed, came at me instead. "Don't fight it," Mac shouted. "Just ignore it. It only has power if we acknowledge it." I dropped the extinguisher. Turned my back on the thing. Focused on the windshield. We were entering the tunnel. Mile 41. The doubled entrance swallowing us. The other train's headlights so close, I could see the pilot of its locomotive. Could see the other engineer's face, mouth open in shock. Hands reaching for controls that wouldn't save him. Rule 1. Never look directly into the Mile 41 tunnel mouth when the headlight first hits it. I'd already looked. Too late to undo that. But maybe I could still choose what I did with what I'd seen. I sat down in the conductor's seat, picked up the consist log, and started writing routine entry. Time, position, cargo status. As if this was any other night. As if the world wasn't coming apart around us. Max saw what I was doing, nodded, sat down at the engineer's position and adjusted the throttle with steady hands. Maintaining our crawl through the tunnel, the Tyler thing screamed behind us. The walker appeared in the side window, pounding on the glass. The radio cycled through voices. Dispatch. Robert Hart, Tyler, my sister, Sarah, every person I'd ever known, begging us to do something, to respond, to make a choice. And we did nothing. We ran the train. We followed the schedule. We maintained speed and heading and adherence to every boring, procedural, life-saving rule we'd been given. The tunnel walls were phasing. Solid, then transparent, then solid again. Through them I could see the wreckage of the 78 collision superimposed over us. Could see bodies, flames, twisted metal. Could see Robert Hart trapped in his cab. And for a moment our eyes met across 46 years. He was mouthing something. The same words over and over. Follow the rules. Follow the rules. Follow the rules. And then we were through. Mile 42. The tunnel spit us out into the storm and everything snapped back into singular reality. The radio went silent. The pressure vanished. My watch jumped forward 23:52. The Tyler thing was gone. The walker was gone. The overlapping train was gone, just us. Just the storm. Just steel and schedules and physics. Mac let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "We did it. We actually—" The locomotive shuddered, not from wind, something else. A sideways lurch, like we'd been hit by something massive from the right, even though there was nothing there. The same shudder witnesses described from the 78 collision. The moment trying to push the trains out of alignment, trying and failing. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then stopped. Mac brought us to a full stop. We sat in the cab, rain hammering the roof, breathing hard. "Is it over?" I asked. "For tonight," Mac rubbed his face. "It'll try again. Different approach, probably, but tonight we won. Why?" I turned to look at him. Why did it work? Why did just doing nothing work? "Because the moment feeds on choice," Mac said. "Every time someone engages with it, acknowledges it, tries to fight it or fix it, they give it substance. They make it more real. The rules aren't about avoiding the moment. They're about not feeding it, not giving it the interaction it needs to complete, like starving it." "Exactly." Mac restarted the prime mover. "As long as we don't play its game, it can't win." We rolled on toward Lowell's Ford. The storm followed but didn't catch us. Behind us in the dark stretch, the moment was already resetting, preparing for the next crew, the next test. But for tonight, for this run, we'd survived. And in the tunnel, in some space between then and now, Robert Hart's echo could rest. We'd heard him, we'd followed the rules, we'd refused to give the collision its ending. Back at the yard in the pre-dawn hours after what we'd come to call the storm run, paperwork erased everything. Dispatch asked for a routine report. Cargo delivered. Minor delays due to weather, no incidents. I filled out the forms with steady hands, writing fiction that was technically true. We had delivered the cargo. There had been delays. There were no incidents that could be documented in language the railroad would accept. Mac signed off on my report without reading it. He'd done this enough times to know that some nights existed in the gap between what happened and what could be written down. But we both knew something had changed. The line had thrown everything at us. Every rule violation, every psychological lever, every tool it had accumulated over 46 years, and we'd held. The moment had tested us at maximum intensity and failed to get what it needed. That should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like a reprieve, a postponement. "It'll adapt," Max said as we walked to the parking lot. The sun was just touching the horizon, turning the sky purple and gold. Normal morning. Ordinary world. It's been learning since '78. Every crew that runs the line, every broken rule, every close call, it learns from all of it. So what do? He pulled the folded rules sheet from his pocket. The original, creased and stained. "We update the protocols. That's how it's always worked. When the moment finds a new approach, we document the countermeasure. The rules aren't static. They're alive. They evolve as the threat evolves." We sat at a picnic table near the crew ready room, one of those weathered wooden structures that had been there longer than either of us. Mac pulled a pen from his jacket. "You saw more than I did tonight," he said. "You tell me what we need to add." I thought about it. About the overlapping trains, the false crew member, the shudder that wasn't wind. All the ways the moment had tried to manipulate us. "If the signals between 36 and 42 all show green at once," I said slowly, "we already know to treat them as dark. But we should specify proceed at restricted speed no matter what dispatch says. Make it explicit." Mac nodded and wrote, "If signals between 36-42 all show green at once, treat them as dark. Proceed at restricted speed no matter what dispatch says." "And the radio orders," I continued. "Any instruction to make up time should trigger a protocol. Assume it's not dispatch. Don't report position. If radio orders you to make up time, assume it's not dispatch. Do not repeat your location." "The time loop," I said. "When the clock repeats, when any clock shows the same time twice, we need to stay off the radio for at least 2 miles. No position reports, no acknowledgements. Radio silence. When time repeats on any clock, stay off the radio for 2 miles and don't change speed suddenly." Mac added that one, then paused. "What about the tunnel? You looked at it tonight." "Full view, yeah." I rubbed my eyes, still seeing the doubled entrance, the overlapping locomotives. But looking after we were already committed didn't seem to make it worse. It was looking during the initial approach that created the pull. So maybe, don't look until the lead unit is already inside. No one looks into the mile 41 tunnel mouth until the entire lead unit is inside. Watch only your instruments. Good. Mac kept writing. Then he stopped, pen hovering. There's one more. The shudder. When we cleared the tunnel, that sideways hit. What about it? If you feel the train shudder like that, like a lateral impact where there's nothing to hit you, don't speak of it on board. Don't acknowledge it on the radio. The line listens. If it knows we felt it, It might try to make it stronger next time, I nodded slowly. That made sense, in the strange logic we'd learned to navigate. If you feel the train shudder like a sideways hit where there's no wind, do not speak of it on board. The line listens. Should we write that one down? I asked. On the official sheet, Mac considered. No, some things we keep off the paper. Too hard to explain. Too easy for someone to dismiss as paranoia. He tapped his temple. But we remember. And we tell the next conductor who's ready to hear it. He folded the updated rules sheet and handed it to me. Your turn to carry this. You've earned it. I took the paper, feeling the weight of decades of experience compressed into those typed and handwritten lines. Names I'd never know had contributed to this document. Conductors who'd survived and probably some who hadn't. Mac, I said, what happens if we run out of rules? If the moment finds something we can't counter? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunrise paint the rail yard in shades of amber. Then someone probably dies. And if we're lucky, whoever survives documents it, adds a new rule, and the next crew gets a better chance. That's a hell of a system. It's the only system we've got. Max stood up, joints creaking. This line isn't going to get shut down. Too much history, too much infrastructure investment. Company doesn't believe in ghosts, and even if they did, they wouldn't close a profitable route because of them. So we do what railroad workers have always done. We learn the territory, we respect its dangers, and we don't take unnecessary risks. By running straight through a paradox every night, he smiled slightly, by following the rules. There's a difference. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. I ran the line with Mac 4 nights a week. We saw the walker. We felt the pressure at the tunnel. Denton's lights activated twice more, but there were no full-scale assaults. No nights like the storm run. The moment was watching, learning, preparing its next approach. We stayed ready. I started adding my own observations to the conductor's ledger in the old locker. Small details, how the fog seemed to respond to our headlight as if it was aware. The way the ballast around mile 38 was always slightly damp, even in drought. The quality of the silence inside the tunnel, not absence of sound, but a presence of listening. Other conductors occasionally asked about the rules. Most dismissed them as tradition. A few, the ones who'd been on the line long enough to see something they couldn't explain, asked follow-up questions. I answered carefully, the way Mac had taught me. Give them the protocols without the full context. Let them discover the why on their own. You can't convince someone of impossibility. They have to experience it. Tyler never came back to the eastern routes. I heard he transferred to a daylight freight line out west. Probably better for him. Some people aren't built for the dark stretches, and there's no shame in that. At home, I found myself keeping odd hours even on my nights off, sleeping during the day, awake at night, as if my circadian rhythm had permanently adjusted to life between 22s and 04. Sarah called once. We hadn't spoken since the breakup, and asked if I was okay. I told her I was. It wasn't exactly a lie. I was functional. I was coping. I was following the rules. I just wasn't entirely sure anymore which world was more real. The daylight one where trains were machines and physics was reliable, or the night one where the line between then and now was negotiable, and the dead could borrow voices. 3 months after the storm run, Mac pulled me aside after a routine shift. I'm retiring, he said. The words didn't process at first. What? End of the year. I've got my 30 years in. Pension's good. And he looked toward the dark stretch, invisible now in daylight. I'm tired, Caleb. I've carried this long enough. But who'll you? He said it with complete confidence. You'll run lead conductor on the night line. And you'll train whoever comes next. The weight of that settled on me. 30 years of knowledge, of accumulated protocol, of nights spent negotiating with impossibility. He was handing me all of it. I don't know if I'm ready. No one's ever ready. Mac smiled. But you've survived the tests. You've proven you can hold the line. That's all we can ask. What will you do? Sleep, mostly. Normal hours. Maybe I'll remember what sunlight looks like. He gripped my shoulder. But I'll keep my scanner on. If you ever need advice, if anything new happens you can't counter, you call me. Day or night? Okay, and Caleb. His expression turned serious. Don't try to solve it. Don't try to fix the moment or free the trapped or make sense of it all. That way lies madness. Just run the train. Follow the rules, survive, that's the job. He retired on December 31st. There was a small party at the yard office, cake, coffee, handshakes. He gave a short speech about pride in the railroad and the importance of safety. Never mentioned the real reasons he'd lasted 30 years. Never acknowledged the dark stretch or the rules or the nights that required more than skill. But when he shook my hand at the end, he pressed something into my palm. The original rules sheet. The one he'd carried for 3 decades. Your turn, he said, and then he walked out. Got in his truck and drove away into a sunny afternoon, leaving me standing in the yard with a piece of paper that weighed more than physics allowed. On my first night as lead conductor, I got a new hire. Her name was Jess Patel, 28 years old, fresh from conductor training school, all enthusiasm and technical knowledge, and that particular confidence that comes from never having encountered something textbooks can't explain. She reminded me of myself 4 months earlier, before the Walker, before Denton, before I'd learned that schedules and steel weren't the only forces running these rails. We met at the yard office at 22:00. She was reviewing the route map when I arrived, memorizing the mile markers and signal locations like she was preparing for an exam. "Jess," I said. She looked up, extended her hand. "Caleb Hart. Heard you're the best on the night routes. I'm really looking forward to learning from you." I shook her hand, thinking about how I'd said similar things to Mac, how innocent I'd been. "Welcome to the Eastern Division." We did the pre-trip inspection together. I showed her how Mac had taught me, not just checking the equipment, but listening to it, feeling for wrongness in the weight distribution, the brake pressure, the way the locomotive settled on the rails. She followed along, competent and thorough, but I could see she thought I was being overly cautious. That was fine. Caution would help. We climbed into the cab. I took the engineer's position. I'd been certified for both roles now, and gestured her to the conductor's seat, the same seat I'd occupied 4 months ago, when Mac had handed me the rules. She buckled in, checked the radio, pulled out a notebook. Ready to learn. I reached above the sun visor and pulled down the folded sheet. The original, Mac's handwriting on the additions, my own notes in the margins. 46 years of accumulated wisdom, compressed into a single stained page. I handed it to her. "Before we roll," I said, "you need to read this." She unfolded it, scanned the contents, and I watched her face go through the same progression mine had. Amusement, confusion, skepticism. "Is this serious?" "Completely. Never look into the mile 41 tunnel." She glanced up. "That's a safety thing, right?" "Like there's a structural issue?" "Just follow the rules," I said. "All of them. Exactly as written, especially between mile 36 and 42, the dark stretch." She'd clearly read the route briefings. "High accident history?" "Something like that." She looked at me, trying to determine if this was hazing. The same calculation I'd made. "Okay, I'll follow them. But no buts." I started the prime mover, felt it rumble to life. "You follow them or you won't last." That's not a threat. That's just how the line works. We rolled out of the yard at 22:30. Clear night, temperature dropping, first hint of winter in the air. The route was familiar now. Every signal mast, every grade crossing, every curve. My territory. My responsibility. Jess was professional, asking good questions about cargo handling, brake calculations, radio protocols. Smart, capable. Exactly the kind of conductor the railroad needed. I just hoped she'd also be the kind who could adapt when the textbook stopped applying. At mile 30, I keyed the radio. Eastern 46 approaching mile 36, requesting clearance. Copy Eastern 46 clear through to mile 50. I glanced at Jess. "The next section is different. You'll feel it. Don't panic. Just stay focused on your duties." She nodded, but I could see the curiosity in her expression. The skepticism not quite gone. Mile 36. We crossed into the dark stretch. The temperature in the cab dropped 3 degrees. Jess frowned, reached for the heater controls, but I shook my head. "Leave it. It's not the heater." "Then what?" "You'll see." Mile 38 approached. I kept my eyes forward, watching the instruments, but in my peripheral vision I saw it. The Walker keeping pace on Jess's side. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She turned to look out her window and I saw her stiffen. "Caleb, there's someone on the ballast walking there." She leaned closer to the glass. "They're keeping up with us." "Rule 4, I said calmly. "Don't acknowledge them, but they might need help." "They might be. They don't need help. And if you acknowledge them, They'll acknowledge you back. I kept my tone neutral, procedural. Look at your paperwork. Not the window. She hesitated, every instinct probably screaming to do something. Then slowly, she turned away from the window and picked up the consist log. Her hands were shaking, but she started writing. Cargo check, brake status, routine entries. Doing her job even though something impossible was happening 3 feet away. The walker paced us for another half-mile, then stepped off into nothing. Jess looked up. What was that? Part of the line, I said. Part of what makes the dark stretch different. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. We were approaching mile 40. Get ready for the tunnel. And Jess, whatever you do, keep your eyes on the instruments until I say it's clear. Why? Because Rule 1 exists for a reason. I saw her glance at the rules sheet, still folded on the console. Saw the conflict in her face, the skepticism fighting with what she'd just witnessed. Then she made the choice. The same choice I'd made. The choice every conductor who survives has to make. She looked down at the instruments. Mile 41. The tunnel mouth approached. I felt the pressure invitation. Weaker now that I knew what it was, but still present. Still pulling. The line asking its question, will you look? Will you engage? Will you give me substance? No, I thought. Not tonight. Not ever. We entered the tunnel. The pressure peaked, then released. Wheels over expansion joints, diesel echo off stone. Ordinary physics, ordinary engineering. Nothing impossible here if you didn't look for it. We emerged. Mile 42, clear territory. Jess exhaled slowly. That was... I don't know what that was. That was the line, I said. Testing you. Seeing if you'll follow the rules or trust your instincts. And you chose right. I throttled up slightly, resuming normal speed. Keep choosing right and you'll be fine. She was quiet for several miles, processing, trying to fit what she'd experienced into a worldview that made sense. I remembered that mental work. The cognitive dissonance. The slow, reluctant acceptance that reality was wider than she'd been taught. At mile 50, well clear of the dark stretch, she finally spoke again. How long has this been happening? Since 1978, probably longer, but that's when it got documented. And the company knows. The company knows there's high incident history. They don't know or won't accept why. I adjusted the reverser. So we handle it ourselves. We follow the rules. We train the next conductor. We survive. That's insane, yes, I agreed. But it's also the job. She looked at the rules sheet again, reading it more carefully this time. Not with skepticism, but with the attention you give to something that might save your life. The dispatcher voice without a call sign, she read. The Denton station. The green signals. Have you seen all of these? All of them. Some multiple times, and people have died. People have died, I confirmed. Including my great-uncle. February 1978. Head-on collision at mile 41. She absorbed that. You're running the same route where your family member was killed, and you're dealing with whatever that was back there. And you still come back every night. Someone has to. I glanced at her. And now you're part of that someone. If you want to transfer, I'll understand. Nobody will judge you. Jess was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkness rolling past. Then she folded the rules sheet carefully and put it in her vest pocket. No, she said. I'll stay. But I want to understand. I want to know everything. That'll take time. And experience. Then I guess we'd better get started. I smiled slightly. Yeah, I guess we had. We rolled on toward Lowell's Ford, and I felt something I hadn't felt since the storm run, hope. Not that the moment would stop trying. Not that the line would suddenly become explicable, but hope that the knowledge would continue, that the rules would be carried forward, that when I eventually retired, 30 years from now or 3 or next week if the line finally found my breaking point, someone competent would take the sheet and keep running. The line was patient. The moment was hungry. The Walker and the Denton passengers and the tunnel's doubled mouth would continue their work night after night, trying to pull the living into the unfinished collision. But we had our own work, our own protocols, our own covenant written in grease-stained paper and cautious voices. We had the rules, and as long as we followed them, as long as each conductor trained the next, passed on the warnings, respected the territory, the moment wouldn't get its ending. The collision would stay unfinished, the trapped would stay trapped, and the line would continue to run, through the dark stretch, through the impossible miles between 36 and 42, carrying freight and passengers, and the weight of 46 years of Paradox normal schedule. Normal operations. Nothing to see here but steel and physics and the ordinary work of running a train through rural Pennsylvania, unless you knew where to look, unless you'd been tested, unless you carried the rules to end of transmission Aston. Division Nightline rules updated. Last revision, Caleb Hart. Lead conductor status, active next training cycle. Ongoing, he looked at Jess as we approached Lowell's Ford, seeing in her face the same determination I'd felt 4 months ago, the same stubborn refusal to let impossibility win, the same quiet acceptance that some jobs require more than training. "Welcome to the Nightline," I said. She nodded, eyes on the rails ahead, already watching for the next anomaly, the next test, already learning to survive. The rules were safe, the line would continue, and somewhere in the dark stretch behind us, far below in stone and steel and old wreckage, something restless adjusted its approach, patient as rust, hungry as memory, waiting, always waiting, for the conductor who'd finally get the answer wrong.